Take two. The computer noise was just too much, so I'm going to redo it all. Okay. And so, yeah, you're going to miss out on some really cool lines that I give and whatever. Maybe you'll get some newer cool lines that were not in the original. Like that one. Okay. So, I'm no longer watching The Sopranos. I'm finished with that now. And I made the connection with the SNL skit, the cold open about the diner scene. That now makes sense. And I'm now on to the newsroom. And I'm kind of disappointed because I specifically turned it off while I was doing the first take because I liked the show. I mean, yeah, granted it doesn't have dancing girls, but it's really funny and sarcastic and makes the point about true news versus fake news and the desire to inform people with the truth rather than entertain people with lies and deception and distraction. But yeah, everybody wants to be entertained rather than find out what's actually going on in the world. And back in the 70s, housewives and grannies were complaining, "The news is so negative. We want stories of cupcake baking and kittens and puppies and babies." So yeah, The Simpsons did a great episode when they first got started, which was why they became so popular, is because somebody complained about them. Excuse me. And the reason why they complained was they thought that The Simpsons was, not for kids. Duh. Was it Fox? I don't think it was Fox back then, was it? Well, whatever. The TV station saw it as a cartoon, and even though it's supposed to be an adult satire, they placed it during the kids' cartoon time. And so that's why the housewives complained. So yeah, they weren't going to have it compete with Magnum PI and Miami Vice and whatever else was on other channels. What was on other channels? Oh yeah, that Little House thing. Yeah, my siblings had to go up in Mommy's bedroom to watch that show. Well, I watched Magnum PI, real men's shows. Alright, so but Mormons, now that we can try to tie it back, as I've added an extra 2 minutes that I didn't have in the previous take. Mormons do not see what's going on with reporting of actual church scandals. Do not get it. The Mormons that are still left in the church refuse to listen to any source that does not support the church. If it's critical against the church, if it reveals scandals and P-tapes, Mormons are like, no, we sort of we're curious, but no, we will not believe it. But we are curious about the P-tape. So yeah, that's skyrocketing in popularity right now. And it's only been one day. But the translation scandal, that's the one I got you on, where I realized, hey, we got something here. Mormons are more aggressive and violent regarding translation than by any other of the faults of the church. Very interesting. So I thought I would do this video today, and have to redo it because of the noise of the computer the first time around. And so understand. Well, I could probably get into it when I talk about it. So this is the introduction to the video. And Mormons, I will be using the church on this. Quotes from the prophets, quotes from the scriptures, because you will be outraged. You will not listen to anybody who is critical of the church. So I will show you from the horses' mouths themselves that the church is not true, that they don't have the key of translation, that they are perpetuating a fraud upon all of us. I was born and raised Mormon. They deceived me too. And so, yeah, this was my research as I took my journey. And this wasn't the cause for me leaving. No, it was Brigham Young as a mass murderer that caused me to leave. But it was Bishop Reed Hammond who kicked me out of his ward. And I've already discussed that on several videos and website blogs and blah, blah, blah. So, alrighty, here we go. Take 2 of the LDS translation scandal. Alrighty, here we are at the church's website. Notice that they're passing the buck again. They no longer answer questions of members of the church. They pass it off to the stake presidents and bishops, and now they're wanting members of the church to do the work of the leaders of the church. And so that the leaders of the church don't have to lift a single finger. Alright, so let's see. First thing we need to go to is King Follett sermon. I think I did King Follett last time, but it still points up the same stuff. Okay, and like I said in the other video, you can't see my cursor. It doesn't work when I change it in the settings. I don't understand why, but alrighty, here we go. King Follett sermon. Alright, given in April 1971. This was when, as far back as you can go for conference talks in the church. The 1970 and earlier, the church does not have those videos uploaded on their website. So only from April 1971 can you go to. And I don't even think they have the texts of any of the older versions of conference. So you got to go to another site for that. Anyway, all right, King Follett sermon. King Follett was a member of the church who died, and Joseph Smith was giving the funeral talk at his funeral. And so that's why it's called the King Follett sermon. And alrighty, April 7th, 1844. One day off from the sign of Jesus' birth. And it's not April 6th. If you saw my other video, you know that the actual date is April 8th. But we're not here to discuss that in this video. We're here to discuss Joseph Smith's talk, not about becoming gods, but about translation. And religious freedom, which has now been messed up with, and an exalted man. There's the
quote, God himself was once as we are now, and is an exalted man, and sitteth enthroned in yonder heavens. That is the great secret. Dun, dun, dun. Alrighty. Everlasting burnings. Whoops. Went too far. So here Joseph Smith talks about having an old edition of the New Testament in Latin, Hebrew, German, and Greek languages, and says that the German is, and find it, the German, to be the most nearly correct translation. I don't know why the transcriber had to include nearly, but yeah, the most correct translation. And to correspond nearest to the revelations which God has given to me for the last 14 years. He gave this in 1844, remember? So the church was established, in 1830, so 14 years. This is the doctrine that Joseph Smith was talking about, and says that the German translation of the New Testament is the most correct. Not the 1769 King James Version, the German. Thus, the English translation of the German, which the German text, by the way, if you didn't know, is the Luther Bible. If you don't know the story of Luther, I highly recommend you learn about it. And they have a movie so that you can be entertained at the same time. Alright, so the previous video I went through Bara, which was previous to that. So Joseph Smith in the first talks about, I suppose I am not allowed to go into an investigation of anything that is not contained in the Bible. Thus why I'm doing this, only contained by the words of the prophets of the church. And we're starting with Joseph. If I do something other than talking about what the prophets say, I think there are so many other Mormons, wise men in Joseph's case, here that would cry treason and put me to death. Yeah, isn't that interesting? We now have Des Nat that wants to do just that. Alrighty. So I will go to the old Bible and the words of the prophets and turn commentator today. Alrighty, then he says, I shall comment on the very first Hebrew word in the Bible. He's going from the Hebrew text in the Old Testament. How do we know it's the Old Testament? Because he says, I will make a comment on the very first sentence of the history of the creation in the Bible. And so the German for the New Testament is the more doctrinally correct, but the Hebrew translation, which is more accurate than the English, still Joseph Smith is making the claim, is also incorrectly translated. And we're going to get to that somewhat soon. Alright, Bereshit. I want to analyze the word baith, in, by, through. It's actually not baith. He's using the letter in this particular case. It's just the B. And yes, when it's used at the beginning of a word, it has this prepositional meaning. In, by, through. So that's why you can't find Baith in the spelling of Bereshit. And then he goes on to Rosh, the head. And then sheet. There's an error there. It's not sheet because the SH is already in Rosh. So it's eat. And that's a grammatical termination. And I think in the other video, I talk about Baral and broke it up. Rao is the Hebrew word for seer. And I brought up a repeat of my video that I discussed about Reuben. Reuben was not the name. It is Ra ben Yaakov. That's his actual name. And so Reuben is actually just Ra, which is seer. Seer, son of the usurper. And you don't understand that unless you understand the origin documents from which all of this comes from. And we're going to get to it because that's the scandal of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Alrighty. And then here he talks about an old Jew without any authority added the word. A Jew without authority? Huh. Isn't that interesting that he would say that? He's talking about Jews falling into apostasy. Huh. So, yeah, Jesus, what is he doing? He's restoring the ancient church. Huh. Which means the Jewish Caiaphas, the high priest, is apostate as the leader of the apostate Jews. Huh. Wonder if there's a pattern for the last days. Huh. Alrighty. And so here's his translation of Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, which we realize is only half of it. The head one of the gods brought forth the gods. That is the true meaning. Then he goes on to say, if you do not believe it, you do not believe the learned man of God. Now do you understand why I have a tone with you Mormons? If you do not believe me, you do not believe the inspiration that I'm getting from God. Because your prophets, they ain't got the key of translation. They aren't receiving revelation because they are without any authority. Okay. And, yeah. So, yeah, we're getting a lot of new stuff in this take. Alrighty. So, catch on to what Joseph Smith is talking about here. He's saying the German text is the most doctrinally correct of the New Testament. The German text, doctrinally correct. And then with the Old Testament, Torah specifically, it's also translated incorrectly. And so we have to find the original source documents. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Alrighty, now we are going to do a search for First Presidency Statement, King James. We could put Bible, we could put version, and it'll still bring up this. See, you can see the highlighting going back and forth because I'm hovering over it with the cursor. Alrighty, August 1982. Oh, I forgot to mention they took out the Hebrew from the King Follett sermon, and they made a mistake. The second reference to a passage from the Hebrew text, they used the exact same passage from from Genesis chapter 1. So they messed up on that. Alright. Okay, this is the first presidency statement on the King James Version of the Bible. And no Mormon knows about it. It's held secret for the leaders of the church. It was most likely announced over the conference pulpit, or not conference, over the sacrament pulpit, maybe. But bishops and stake presidents have it in their manuals so that when the church sends your questions to them, because they refuse to answer all your questions, and as you can imagine, there are multi-bazillions of questions that Mormons have that the church is not willing and not able to answer. And so they pass it on to the stake presidents and bishops. And this is by Ezra Taft Benson, Gordon B. Hinckley, Thomas S. Monson, all who were presidents of the church. Alrighty, so it says, the First Presidency has released the following letter regarding the King James Version of the Bible. And since the days of the prophet Joseph Smith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, has used the King James Version of the Bible for English-speaking members. No, because we just saw Joseph Smith talking about how he has a Latin, a Hebrew, a Greek, a German. So, yeah, they haven't just used the King James Version. And the King James Version we now use today is a more modern translation than the 1769 version that Joseph Smith used back in his day. And so it's not the same. Alright. The Bible, as it has been transmitted over the centuries, has suffered the loss of many plain and precious parts. So obviously he's making an incorrect quoting to the article of faith when he should be going to primary source documents. Never go to secondary source documents to justify your position unless you can't find an original source document. Then you have to acknowledge that it's a primary or secondary source document when you reference. And so Mormons don't do that in their publications. They always quote Hugh Nibley or some other scholar of the church rather than going to the actual source documents. Naughty, naughty. Alrighty, many versions of the Bible are available today. Even Luther's German translation, and also available in English. And here he makes a big, scandalous mistake. Unfortunately, no original manuscripts of any portion of the Bible are available for comparison to determine the most accurate version. Oops! Messed up that one. Big time. Because we just read from Joseph Smith himself that the German is the more doctrinally correct and not the King James Version. And also said that the Hebrew text is also incorrect, which means the Hebrew text is more accurate than the King James text. So, sorry, I'm chewing on M&Ms. In the first take, I was choking on a shell of M&Ms, and I didn't think to say, they don't melt in your mouth either. So, alrighty. try to swallow this down without choking on it. Okay. So Joseph Smith alluded that the Old Testament was incorrectly translated in the Hebrew text, which he went to as a more primary source document than the King James Version. And so the Hebrew text is a more original manuscript than the King James Version, but does give us a clue as to how to correctly translate the Hebrew text of the Bible. And I won't get into that. That's my Hebrew discovery. So yeah, you've got to remove the biblical Hebrew script of the Masoretes and replace it with Paleo-Hebrew so that you can identify the original intended translation, which helps you then identify that it comes from an Egyptian source as the original manuscripts. So, yep, there it is. I already revealed the ending for you. So you can't skip to the end of this video to find out the ending. I gave it to you in the middle. Alrighty, so, and in the New Testament, Joseph Smith said, according to doctrine, that the German translation, thus the English translation of the German, is more accurate doctrinally for the New Testament. Alright, yeah. So, however, the Lord has revealed that you got to use the Book of Mormon to make your modern day comparisons. Unfortunately, the Book of Mormon is a plagiarism of the 1769 version, and so that's what President Benson is making the huge mistake of here. He's trying to justify the use of the King James Version, which was not the 1769 version of the King James Version, because if we were using the 1769 version, we would still have the Apocrypha. Remember section 91 of the Doctrine and Covenants? Joseph Smith said he didn't need to correct the translation. So even though Article of Faith says we believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it is translated correctly, guess what Joseph Smith declared in section 91 of the Doctrine and Covenants? The Apocrypha is the Word of God, because it's mostly translated correctly. Huh. Where is it in our canon? Oops. And so, yeah, that's Benson's big error here, which actually is the responsibility of President Spencer W. Kimball, who brought out the official quad in 79 and 81. Okay. Then he goes on to say, while other Bible versions may be easier to read and more doctrinally correct, as we've read by Joseph Smith, the founder of the church, in doctrinal matters. Oh, he's gonna do it. In the other video I was putting on a drama display. Don't do it. Don't go there. Please, don't do it. No, he's gonna do it, isn't he? Oh, he did it. So yeah, here he goes. In doctrinal matters, and we've already learned that the German text of the New Testament is the more accurate translation in regards to doctrinal matters. But here goes Benson. In doctrinal matters, Latter-day Revelation supports, oh, the King James Version. Oh, this is so painful. Oh, why Mormons haven't left over this, I do not know. Alrighty, and now he's trying to say Joseph Smith is responsible, that he too supports what Benson just said was false. So yeah, he's throwing Joseph Smith in here. Joseph Smith supports me. No, he doesn't. We just read Joseph Smith's words on the matter, and the German text for the New Testament is more accurate in doctrinal matters. So, yep, he's making a huge mistake. And so, yeah, it's a huge embarrassment, Mormons, if you haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so I need to go to my movie maker to do the next videos, because I've got to show pictures and I'll have to talk over the pictures. Alrighty. So this is the scandal, Mormons. This is the translation scandal. And it's a huge embarrassment. But yeah, the focus is not on his errors of not having the Apocrypha and German text or translation. This is no original manuscripts are available. So I need to remember to go back to 1967. Alrighty.
Alright, at the turn of the 20th century, a Utah Baptist minister named Solomon Spaulding came out with a scathing article about how Joseph Smith's translation of the Egyptian papyri was a fraud. And he himself didn't know too much Egyptian, but some of the stuff was starting to get published over in the old world and making it to America. And what he had learned was incorrect. But nevertheless, he thought it was important to warn the world that Joseph Smith was wrong with his translations. Then, in 1936, Heber J. Grant, trustee and trust for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he was the president, funded the publication of R.C. Webb's book, Joseph Smith as a Translator. R.C. Webb was a nom de plume. The original guy, I can't remember his name right now, but I'm sure a quick glance on Google, or Wikipedia rather, would reveal who he is, or his actual name. But he was a news reporter that took on causes, and with Solomon Spaulding, there was a great need for rescuing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because they'd already been under attack. In order to become a state in the Union, Utah was forced to give up the United Order and polygamy. And so now we have somebody coming after the church for translation. And so, yeah, this is a screenshot from R.C. Webb's book, and can't find it anymore. I doubt it's available on Amazon, so if you can get a copy, good luck. He tried to alter Egyptian, as you see here, to try to demonstrate a supporting viewpoint for the church, and it ended up backfiring, because you see the M, for example, is actually an offering, and they didn't offer the whole owl, so that's not the owl as he was trying to suggest by adding feet to it there in the bottom scene. Because if it was the owl, then yes, it would be the phoneme M. And so yeah, he messed up, to try to save the church, and there was another guy, Louis Zucker, a professor at the University of Utah, who gave a lecture at BYU, and also slammed the church, slammed Joseph Smith, because he too said Joseph Smith is not a translator. And so, yeah, the church has been under fire for a long time in many different ways regarding translation. And so that puts the church in a difficult spot. And do I need to go over? No, I don't need to go over the translation and historicity of the Book of Abraham Gospel Topic Essay of the Church. I already did that in another video. But basically, John Gee, to sum him up, said that Joseph Smith wasn't making a translation. He was just making a feeling recording, you know, what he felt the text should say if there were to be a text that would say it. And so, yeah, way to go, John, trying to protect the church by destroying it. And so, yeah, churches, again, destroying themselves. All right, this was the front page of the New York Times newspaper way back in the day. It's too small for me to see the date, but it was, I'm sure, back in the 60s, I'm guessing. Because if you're not familiar, it was November, hold on a second, let me get my paper that has the date. Yeah, November 27th, 1967, that's when the church obtained the Joseph Smith papyri. They got it back. It was in the New York Metropolitan Museum, and it wasn't burned in the Chicago fire as everybody had thought. And New York Times, as you can see, had interviewed Egyptologists who had seen the documents and knew about the church's facsimiles and translation of the Book of Abraham, and was able to say that the church is one big fraud. And so that made big scandalous news back in 1967. As a result, I didn't know any of this scandal. Yeah, growing up in the church, I never knew anything about it. I was born in 1970, and when I went to seminary, I think, well, no, I'm sure I had scriptures before then, but because, yeah, I'm sure when I turned 8 for my baptism, I got a set of scriptures probably, and it was right before the church came out with the new version of the quad, so my parents weren't too inclined to buy the new set, having just bought me one. And so I had to wait till seminary to get the new set. But I was able to see in the Book of Abraham, oh, Mommy, there's Egyptian pictures. And my mom would say, oh, that's for higher learning. You know, you have to have the Spirit with you when you read this, because only those who are enlightened can understand it. So that's what my alt-right, elitist, white supremacist mother was using to explain away the translation problems with the Book of Abraham that were already exposed by then. And she, of course, didn't tell me that there were translation problems. I was just told that, oh, I can't understand it, I can never learn it. And so Southern California didn't have an Egyptian class in grade school or high school or junior high. Had a cooking class in junior high. That was fun, but no Egyptian. And then there's the video about my patriarchal blessing, where it says I'm going to go on a mission, and there's a possibility of a foreign language, and that I should study and look forward to my mission. But what language am I supposed to study? The patriarch didn't tell me. And the New York mission, I was English speaking. So other people were speaking foreign languages. 52 plus nations were represented there in New York at the time, or at least in the Bronx. There's probably more if you include all of New York. Excuse me, yawn. And when I I don't need to talk about that, but yeah, I learned Hebrew at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, and I wanted to find out how Joseph Smith made his translation, because if the first sentence was incorrectly translated, that means the rest of the Hebrew text was also incorrectly translated. So I wanted to know what the accurate translation of the text is. And so I pursued learning, figured out the alphabet, came to Utah after I graduated. And in Utah, they had the Farms organization. And that's where I learned about Louis Zucker. It's because John Gee finally broke down and said, Louis Zucker, University of Utah. So I went to the University of Utah, and their old archive sections that they had at the time, they've since revised it, moved it, and whatever. There was his article, and the guy working there said, I'll just make a copy of it. Don't need to pay for it. Now it's available online. But he too said Joseph Smith was incorrect in his translations. So there's where John Gee learned from his earlier age to dismiss Joseph Smith as a translator, as the church scholars believe that Joseph Smith did not translate anything. They believe him to be a fraud, just as this New York Times paper also described. So isn't that interesting? So I was not satisfied with that. I was a faithful Mormon who is going to figure this out because it's God's true prophet, and I will not allow any Mormon to defy and deny Joseph Smith as being the true prophet of God. How dare they? And it turns out Joseph Smith is actually correct, and that the church is wrong for not supporting and sustaining him. So let me show you the documents of that I'm referring to, where Benson denied that those documents ever existed. And because remember, Benson said there are no original manuscripts that are available. And he knows better, because, as I just pointed out, on November 27th, 1967, the church got back those original manuscripts, of which he denied in 1992 of ever being in existence. The churches had those documents. They had the original manuscripts from which the Bible stories come from, and he either lied about being in possession of them, or the more likely scenario is because they don't have the key of translation, they are not authorized prophets of God, and thus false prophets, that they just didn't realize what they had. Joseph Smith did. He wrote it in the Book of Mormon, called it the brass plates, and was referring instead to the Book of Joseph, which was to replace the Book of Judah. And so, yeah, Benson either deceptively lied to the members of the church, or he ignorantly lied to the members of the church. Either way, he lied to the members of the church in his first presidency statement, which is now the official position of the church regarding the use of the King James Bible that we use today, which is the worst translation in existence. And nobody else is using it. They've all upgraded their translations. Yeah, members of the church were saying, hey guys, shouldn't we have a better translation? You know, Article of Faith number 8 says it's not translated correctly. You guys are the ones who have the gift of translation. You guys are the ones who have the key of translation. So let's get going here, guys. Let's give us a better translation. Nope. They chose not to do it. And as a result, the church remains in darkness. All right, now let's go to the next scene here. Alrighty, here's the Book of Abraham roll that Joseph Smith called it. And facsimile 3 would have been attached somewhere down the line to the left. And this is what remained, I guess. And there you can see facsimile number 1 and how it was chewed up so that the Joseph Smith had to add in extra features. And if you watch my video on this, you'll see exactly how it still is correct, that it is not limited to one translation of the Egyptian gods, but multiple levels, or whatever you want to call it, translations are available in this, because Egyptologists don't translate these glyphs. They translate the text that you see to the right and to the left, yeah, and sometimes in the picture itself. And I've already done that video. We're not going to discuss it here. So, yeah, this is part of the original Bible story. Joseph Smith claimed that it was about Abraham, and like I mentioned in the Bible, Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Abraham by translating the glyph, not the text. So even R.C. Webb is incorrect, thinking that the altar offerings and flower arrangements are Abraham, but they're not. He messes up. Let me show you the next one now. Okay, here's another of the original manuscripts that President Benson neglected to acknowledge in his first presidency statement. This is what Joseph Smith called the Book of Joseph. And Mormons, you should know very well, Book of Joseph comes from Ezekiel 37. That the Book of Joseph will come forth and replace the Book of Judah. And so, yeah, Mormons were all excited in the beginning, but I never heard about it as a kid growing up, because the church had been shamed by Egyptologists with the return of these documents. And like I said, the Egyptologists don't translate the glyphs. And you can see here there's a lot of little tiny glyphs in this one, one of which was carried over into the facsimile number 2. Yeah, I'll show it to you after I talk here, if I can remember now. Alright, so yeah, this is the Book of Joseph. There is a larger glyph in the upper left corner there. So that could have been translated by Joseph if he wanted to. And Oliver Cowdery is said to have made some initial identifications, Enoch and his pillar, Eve and the serpent, and blah blah blah, but he didn't know how to do it. And so yeah, this is what I'm telling you, Mormons. Either President Benson lied about these original manuscripts of the Bible being available and in the possession of the church, which means all the other Egyptian documents which have also been found also are the original manuscripts for the Bible, both Old and New Testament Gospels. And I've already told you that I'm the one who made the discovery that the Egyptian documents are the origin source for the Torah stories, and at the same time, the Zeitgeist crew made the Zeitgeist movie, indicating that the New Testament Gospels were originated from the Egyptian documents, and they didn't fully understand what I understand, and so to them, they just see it as a hodgepodge collection combined into a bigger narrative, but they don't recognize the errors as a result of the original authors. They don't go to the big picture. They stick to the narrow focus. And so, yeah, the new generation of scholarship since 2000 has already known all this stuff, and unfortunately the leader of the Zeitgeist movement, D.M. Murdoch, died of cancer, so it sort of died with her, and it didn't help that Gary Greenberg, in his 101 Myths of the Bible, didn't reference anything. And so he was shot down, even though he made a lot of money on the publications of his books. And he hasn't done anything since then on that subject. So he had something, but didn't develop it. And the book, 101 Myths, he suggests it, but doesn't develop it. I'm the one who developed it. So he's the source where I got that from, but I was the one who developed it into an actual theory that could be tested. And so yeah, I can now look back on his book and say, yeah, he's right on target in the beginning, though he misses out on several key things, but he dies in the end of the book, almost as if he was trying to force stuff to reach 101. But yeah, critics have come out and tried to dismiss his work because he didn't reference anything. But if you know Egyptian and you know the Egyptian documents, you are the reference. You know what references you can go to that he should have put in there. So yeah, he was right on target, despite the critics who don't know Egyptian and therefore make an error in their claim, in their criticism. You can't use Christian belief and doctrine to claim that the origin theory from Egyptian is wrong. It just doesn't hold any water. Despite Christians forcing people to believe them, their feelings and opinions on the matter. It just, might and dominance does not make right. So Christians don't get that, but Mormons don't either. So, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to show you the facsimile 2 scene taken from this document. Alright, and there's the connection right there. the scene from the Joseph Smith papyri, from what he called the Book of Joseph. That picture right there in the circled red was where they placed in facsimile number 2, because as you can see, the red was missing from facsimile, the hypocephali, phallus, singular is phallus, phalli is plural, and so they needed to fill in the gaps in this picture, just like they had to do in facsimile number 1. And so Joseph Smith took that from the Book of Joseph and put it in there, which doesn't belong there. It's something else that goes there. Yeah, that's why the head is different as well. But Joseph Smith was close. He was going off of the upper scene to place it there. So typically there's 6 or 8 heads on the canum there. Canum. But yeah, and then the writing on the outer rim, that comes from the Book of Abraham text, or the papyrus that's called the Book of Abraham text. And scholars have already identified the part in the text where it comes from, but I'm not going to go over that. But yeah, this is to show you that Joseph Smith, when he got the Egyptian papyri, he knew that this was the original source of the Bible, and so when Benson comes along and says there are no original manuscripts of the Bible, he demonstrates his ignorance of what Joseph Smith was trying to teach everybody from the Book of Mormon and about Ezekiel 37, is that the Book of Joseph is Egyptian documents. And that all they need to be done to them is combined into a narrative, just like the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, was done in like manner. So, see, I'm going to have some audio problems here. There's audio carrying over here. I don't know if it'll delete if I put in the new audio. Alright, so I think that's it. That's the translation scandal. That the church presidents have had the original manuscripts of the Bible available to them to make a translation, to demonstrate to the world that the Mormon God is the true and living God, and that they are the true and living prophets, seers, revelators, and translators. That the Mormon church can stand tall and say, yes, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And unfortunately, Mormons have been tucking their tail between their legs and trying to keep all this a secret. And because I didn't know about it growing up. And now the Gospel Topic essay says that Joseph didn't even translate. So this is shameful for the church. This is a huge embarrassment. And I hope you understand, Mormons. I was born and raised in the church. I was devout. I was faithful. You know, I went to the temple every day. Yes, every day. Starting in 2000, when I started, well, it would happen in March, when I finally got a computer and was able to do my own research from that point on and work on the temple-ready names. So yeah, I was going every single day doing family names. That's how faithful I was, and I'm sorry if you think I'm not being humble, but I am the top scholar in the church and the world, technically. But yeah, I'm the smartest Mormon, so I know exactly what I'm talking about here. And I know that the church is perpetuating a fraud, because their leaders, the presidents of the church, the prophets, do not have the keys of authority, because they've had the documents this whole time. They could have just simply made the translation and proven to the world that they are true prophets, and they've done nothing, and they've said otherwise. President Benson said, there is no original documents available for us to make an accurate translation, so we're going to stick with this horrible King James Version. And then the gospel topic essays. They're now saying Joseph was wrong. And they're changing the doctrine from faith to fruit to faith alone. Because if you produce the fruit, Egyptologists have told the church that the fruit is wrong. And I've done the video demonstrating that no, Egyptologists are actually incomplete, and the new scholarship is showing that the original manuscript of the Bible are from the Egyptian documents. So that's the scandal, and the church isn't true because of it. And the church is trying to destroy Joseph Smith, not just with polygamy, but also the translation. So Brigham Young is the cause. Brigham Young did not have authority, and therefore turned the church into the great and abominable church that the Book of Mormon talks about. So there you go.